The morning light came thin and pale over the row of houses, washing the neighborhood in a tired kind of gold. Wind moved through the maples like a restless sigh, carrying the faint smell of frost and mulch. Ethan Hale stood at the edge of his driveway, coffee cooling in his hand, and stared at the mess near his mailbox. Splintered wood, scattered nails, bright red paint smeared across the curb like blood. What used to be a birdhouse lay in ruin. He crouched, picking up the little wooden roof, cracked clean in half. The white letters still visible on the side, Lily's house for tiny birds, written in the uneven scrawl of a 9-year-old with too much enthusiasm and not enough patience. The birdhouse had been her weekend project. She'd spent hours painting it, insisting the blue should look like sky but happier. Now it was crushed, as if someone had stepped on it. He didn't have to guess who. A car door slammed across the street. The sound broke the soft morning quiet. "Lovely day, isn't it?" a woman's voice called. Ethan straightened, jaw tight. Carol Benton stood in her driveway, the head of the HOA, self-appointed protector of property values in proper decorum. Her silver SUV gleamed in the sun, spotless, like it had never known dust or accident. She wore her usual pastel sweater and an expression that could slice marble. "Morning," Ethan said flatly. "I noticed that little structure you had by the mailbox. Birdhouses aren't allowed in front yards. They attract pests." "It was for my niece. It's a birdhouse, Carol. Birds are kind of the point." She gave a polite, humorless smile. "The HOA guidelines classify them as decorative structures. You need prior approval. Approval to hang a birdhouse. Rules are rules," she said, voice clipped. "You received your handbook, didn't you?" Ethan looked at the broken remains in his hand, then back at her. "You didn't just take it down, you smashed it." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "If something violates policy, it's my responsibility to remove it. I may have overestimated its sturdiness." He almost laughed, almost, but the way she looked at him with that tight, unshakable calm, it froze the humor in his throat. "Have a good day, Ethan," she said, turning toward her SUV. The serve started, backed out, and drove off, tires leaving faint tracks in the dew. Ethan stood there until the sound faded. Then he looked down at the birdhouse again. The red paint had stained his fingers. Inside, the coffee pot burbled to itself, the smell of roasted beans filling the quiet kitchen. He set the broken birdhouse on the counter beside Lily's watercolor mess from last weekend, paper sunflowers, glue smears, glitter everywhere. Her laughter still seemed to echo faintly from the corners of the house. He'd told her the birdhouse would still be there when she came back next weekend. He grabbed his phone and scrolled through his security app. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. 11:43 p.m. Carol's SUV idling by the curb, headlights off, the door open, a brief glint of metal, a thud, then a crunch. The roof split in half under her boot. She hadn't even tried to hide it. Ethan exhaled slowly through his teeth. This wasn't enforcement, it was a message. He'd moved to this suburb 6 months ago, looking for quiet, a break from city sirens and deadlines. But peace came with fine print, and that fine print had Carol Benton's name printed all over it. Last fall, she'd left a note about the improper angle of his Halloween pumpkins. In October, she sent an email regarding unapproved outdoor lighting. His porch bulb was too warm in hue. 2 months ago, she fined a neighbor for using wind chimes that were audibly intrusive. He'd laughed it off, until now. By noon, the wreckage was gone. He rebuilt the birdhouse from what was left. New nails, new paint, same shape. When the sun began to set, it hung from the old oak tree in the corner of his yard. Brighter this time. Red roof, yellow sides, stronger joints. The next morning, it was gone again. Not broken, missing entirely. He found it later that day in the community dumpster, buried with leaves and half-frozen trash, the wire hook still attached, bent backward. When he came home that evening, a letter waited on his doorstep, sealed in an HOA envelope. Unauthorized decorative installations must be removed immediately. Repeated violations may result in a fine. He crumpled the letter in his hand and laughed quietly to himself, not out of humor, but disbelief. That night, he sat at his workbench. The garage smelled of sawdust and varnish. He pulled out a fresh plank, cut it clean, and started again. The hammer strikes were steady, deliberate, almost meditative. He sanded every edge, sealed the wood, reinforced the base. By midnight, the new birdhouse sat gleaming under the garage light, perfect symmetry, flawless joints, strong enough to survive a storm. When he hung it the next morning, he used a steel bracket bolted into the tree. Let her try now, he thought. Across the street, Carol stood by her mailbox, pretending to sort letters. Her eyes flicked toward him, sharp as glass. "Good morning," she called. "Morning." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Lovely weather. I see you've been busy." He shrugged. "Just following my passion for decorative structures." Her expression twitched just slightly. "Let's hope it's temporary." He nodded, still smiling. "It's as temporary as you make it." When she walked away, the smile on her face tightened until it cracked.
That evening, his neighbor Tom shuffled over. Faded jeans, heavy boots, wool hat pulled low. "Heard about the birdhouse fiasco," he said. "She's on a roll lately. Fined the Masons for having a wreath with red ribbon. Said it was too bold." Ethan huffed a laugh. "Red's a dangerous color, apparently." Tom smirked. "I've been here 10 years. Carol's the kind that sleeps with the HOA handbook under her pillow." "Doesn't she ever get tired of controlling everything?" "Control's a drug, buddy. Some people can't function without it." They stood in silence for a while, the birdhouse swinging gently in the wind. "She'll come for it again," Tom said finally. "Let her," Ethan replied. "This one's built to last." Later that night, the neighborhood fell into that strange suburban silence. No dogs barking, no cars passing, just the hum of streetlights and the occasional rustle of dry leaves. Ethan sat by his front window, the birdhouse visible under the moonlight, glowing faintly in the reflection from his porch lamp. He told himself it was fine, that she wouldn't dare again. But somewhere inside, a quiet certainty grew. This wasn't over. And when he glanced toward Carol's house, he saw it. A thin slice of light behind her curtains, unmoving, as if someone stood there, watching. The birdhouse swayed slightly in the wind, creaking on its hook. The sound was small, almost gentle, but it carried through the still night like a heartbeat. He stared at it until his reflection in the glass looked like someone else entirely. Someone who wasn't just building anymore. Someone who was starting to plan. The wind had changed. It came colder now, sharper, with that edge of February that made every breath sting. The air smelled of metal and frozen earth, the kind that hummed in the ears before dawn. He felt it every time he stepped outside, that brittle quiet of a neighborhood half asleep, pretending nothing was wrong. The birdhouse still hung from the oak tree. Still bright, still perfect. But now it looked different. Not a decoration anymore, but a challenge. He caught Carol watching him twice that week, once from behind her lace curtains, barely visible except for the glint of light on her glasses, and again when she walked her tiny dog down the street, stopping right in front of his yard for just a second too long. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. But her silence had a shape. It said, "You know I'm not finished." By Thursday, the letter arrived. Plain white envelope, HOA logo in the corner, perfect black ink. He already knew what it would say before opening it. Notice of fine, non-compliance with decorative structure guidelines, $75. Attached, a photo of his birdhouse, circled in red like evidence from a crime scene. He let the paper sit in his hands for a long time. The smell of printer ink and lemon soap clung to it. Carol's perfume, probably. He folded it once, set it on the kitchen counter, and didn't move for a minute. Then he picked it up again, pinned it to his fridge door with a magnet shaped like a hammer, a quiet promise to himself. The next morning, frost glazed the lawns like glass. He stood by the window, watching kids walk to the bus stop, scarves trailing, laughter thin and fragile in the air. The birdhouse swayed lightly in the wind. A small robin landed on its roof, tilted its head, then flew off again. It was the first bird he'd seen all winter. Something about that tiny moment, that fragile defiance of cold, made him smile. Until he saw Carol. She was standing by her mailbox, clipboard in hand, scarf neatly wrapped, coat zipped high. Her dog pawed at the ground impatiently, but she didn't move, just stared. He lifted his coffee mug slightly, like a wave. She didn't respond. The mug felt heavier than it should. Around noon, I heard footsteps crunching in the snow outside my garage. Steady, even. Not curious footsteps, purposeful. I opened the side door, and there she was again, standing in my yard, one gloved hand on the oak's trunk. "Good afternoon," I said evenly. "Mr. Hale," she replied, tone clipped but civil. "I was inspecting a concern brought to the board." I stared at her. "The board, huh? You mean you?" She smiled small and controlled. "The HOA acts as one voice." Must be nice to be the one holding the microphone. Carol's eyes narrowed just slightly. "You've modified the property layout. It affects uniform visibility." I looked up at the small red roof of the birdhouse. "You mean it exists?" She ignored that. "I understand your attachment, but I hope you can see that rules are not personal. They're for everyone's protection." Protection from what? Birds? Her breath came out slow and white. "From chaos, Mr. Hale." I almost laughed. Almost. But there was something in her tone. Not authority, but fear. A desperate need to keep control of something. Maybe even of herself. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You know, Carol, the more you talk about order, the more you sound like someone trying to convince herself she still has it." Her expression didn't change, but the pulse in her neck did. "This isn't personal," she said again. "Of course it is," I murmured. "Everything is when you can't let stand to lose." For a moment, neither moved. Only the birdhouse between them, swaying gently in the cold air, made a sound. Then Carol turned, her heels snapping against the frozen driveway. "Good afternoon, Mr. Hale." "Afternoon," I said. "Watch your step." She paused just long enough for him to know she'd heard it, then walked away without another word.
That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat in the garage with the lights off, the faint hum of the heater filling the dark. He wasn't angry, not exactly. It was something colder, cleaner. He thought about the kind of people who used rules like weapons, about how they smiled while they twisted the blade. He'd seen them before, in offices, committees, neighborhoods, board meetings, always the same face behind a different name. He rubbed his thumb against the ridge of a screw on the workbench, the metal biting just enough to ground him. "You want rules, Carol?" he thought. "Let's see how deep they go." The weekend came gray and slow, the kind of cold that settled in the bones. the kind that made sound feel heavier. Ethan spent Saturday in the garage again, the smell of cut wood and varnish mixed with coffee and quiet resolve. He wasn't building a new birdhouse, not yet. He was thinking. Every strike of his hammer against a scrap of pine was like punctuation. She won't stop. You shouldn't either. By noon, the frost had melted into slush along the sidewalks. Neighbors came and went, a man in a blue jacket walking his dog, 2 kids dragging a sled even though there was barely snow left. Life went on, pretending nothing was off. Tom stopped by, hands buried deep in his jacket pockets. "You look like you're planning something," he said. Ethan smirked. "I'm always planning something." "Yeah, but this time you've got that look." "What look?" "The one you get right before you do something you'll have to explain later." Ethan chuckled quietly. "Don't worry, I'm keeping it legal." Tom leaned against the garage door. "You know, I once told Carol to leave me alone about my mailbox color. That was 3 years ago. She sent me 8 warning letters and a fine. I paid the fine, painted it gray, never heard from her again." "You gave her what she wanted," Ethan said. "Exactly." Ethan looked up from the table. "That's not how this ends." Monday morning came pale and flat. The neighborhood looked normal, but something underneath had shifted. He could feel it, in the way the mail carrier avoided eye contact, in how Carol's SUV drove slower past his house. That afternoon, another envelope appeared on his porch. He didn't need to open it. He tossed it on the table unopened, next to the first one. By evening, he was done waiting. He sat at his computer, opened his email, and drafted a formal complaint to the HOA board. Not to Carol, but over her. He attached photos, timestamps, and clips from his security camera. Her SUV, her flashlight, her hand smashing the birdhouse. He didn't write anything emotional, just the facts. Facts were stronger than anger. They didn't melt. He hit send. The confirmation came seconds later. "Your report has been received. The board will review the matter during the March 12th meeting." 3 weeks away. He leaned back in his chair, eyes half closed. 3 weeks. That was how long peace was supposed to last. It didn't. The first sign came 2 days later. The trash cans tipped over in the middle of the night. Then his mailbox, its door twisted like someone had yanked it open with force. Then the birdhouse, gone again. He found it at the end of the street, lying in the gutter, cracked down the center. The red roof split like a wound. He stood there in the gray morning light, breath clouding the air, holding the broken thing like something that had once been alive. He carried it home, laid it on his workbench. The smell of damp wood and dirt filled the space. He ran a finger along the crack. The edge was too clean, not weather, deliberate. He stayed there for a long time, not moving. The heater hummed softly in the background, a heartbeat for a house that wasn't sleeping anymore. That night, he began again. No bright paint this time, no cheerful letters, just wood. Nails. Precision. He cut the boards thicker, reinforced the seams with hidden brackets. Inside, he added a layer of fine steel mesh, invisible under the oak finish. The door was fake now, the base solid, the roof locked. He worked slowly, deliberately, every motion quiet and exact. When he was done, it looked almost identical to the old one, but it was heavy, unnaturally heavy for something so small. He ran his palm over the surface, smooth, cold, perfect. This wasn't for birds anymore. The next morning, the sun came weakly through the clouds, painting everything in silver light. He hung the new birdhouse from the same branch, bolted it with steel screws deep into the wood. When he stepped back, it didn't sway, didn't even creak. Carol was watching from across the street, pretending to pick up her mail. Her posture was tight, chin raised slightly higher than usual. Ethan lifted a hand in a lazy wave. "Good morning, Carol." Her lips barely moved. "Morning.
I see you're persistent. He smiled. I'm consistent. You do realize this has to end. Oh, I agree, he said softly. It does. Their eyes met across the quiet street, and for a second the air between them felt colder than winter. By nightfall, clouds rolled in, dimming the neighborhood lights. Ethan stayed by the window, watching the oak tree through the shifting veil of mist. The birdhouse looked almost ghostly now, a faint outline against the dark. Every creak of wood outside made him turn his head. At 12:17 a.m., it happened. Headlights slid down the street, cutting across the frost. Carol's SUV. She parked right in front of his house, engine running low. Ethan's security feed flickered to life. The red recording light blinked. He stayed by the window, half hidden behind the curtain. She stepped out, wrapped tight in her beige coat. The wind caught her scarf, whipped it across her face. Her hands were bare, trembling slightly as she pulled something from her pocket, a screwdriver. She moved to the oak, grabbed the edge of the birdhouse and pulled. It didn't move. She tried again. The hook held. She set her jaw, jammed the screwdriver between the seams, twisting. The camera picked up every motion, every sharp jerk of a wrist. Then a crack. Not from the wood, but from the tool itself. The screwdriver snapped in half. Carol froze, staring at the broken handle in disbelief. Her breath came out ragged, a small cloud in the dark.
Then she looked up, directly at his window. For a long second, they stared at each other. Two silhouettes in the cold, divided by glass and quiet. He didn't move, neither did she. Then she turned, shoved the broken tool into her pocket, and walked back to her SUV. The car rolled away slowly, tires whispering against the wet asphalt. Ethan exhaled for the first time in minutes. Morning came gray again. The birdhouse stood untouched. In the grass, half buried in frost, lay the broken screwdriver handle. He picked it up, turned it in his hand. The plastic was cracked clean through. He set it on the porch railing, where she'd see it next time she passed. The war had stopped for the night, but in the silence that followed, something colder settled between them. Not hate, not fear. Understanding. Neither of them was going to back down. Morning came with a strange stillness, the kind that sits in the air after something's broken, even if no one says it out loud. The sky was pale gray, the lawn stiff with frost, and the street so quiet it almost felt abandoned. Ethan stood by the window, coffee untouched, watching the birdhouse swing softly in the breeze. The frost on its roof sparkled like tiny knives. Across the street, Carol's driveway was empty. Her SUV was gone. For once, her blinds were drawn tight. It should have felt peaceful. It didn't. He couldn't stop thinking about the moment their eyes met. Her face half in shadow, his reflected in the glass. Two people who'd lost any illusion of neighborly civility. The war had gone too far to end politely. By mid-afternoon, the neighborhood was moving again. Sprinklers hissing, dogs barking, someone raking frozen leaves into neat, pointless piles. Ethan was in his garage, sanding down a plank of cedar when Tom walked in. "Morning," Tom said. "You look like hell." "Didn't sleep. Still watching that birdhouse, huh?" He smiled faintly. "Seems like it's watching me back." Tom leaned against the wall, hands deep in his jacket. "Where it is the board's meeting got moved up. Carol pushed for an emergency session tonight." "Of course she did." "She's losing control, Ethan. You've got her cornered, and people are talking. That's dangerous for someone like her." Ethan stopped sanding. Dangerous for who? Tom looked at him for a long second. "For both of you." The meeting took place in the community center, the same sterile room where they held block parties and bake sales. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, rows of folding chairs, a long table at the front, a banner that read Pinebrook Homeowners Association. Ethan sat in the back, Silent. Carol sat at the head of the table, perfect posture, pastel cardigan, clipboard in front of her like armor. Her voice was steady when she spoke, but her hands trembled slightly as she flipped through the pages. There have been accusations concerning certain behaviors, misinterpretations, and, frankly, hostility unbecoming of our community values. Someone coughed, another whispered. Carol's eyes flicked toward Ethan, just for a heartbeat. We all want to live in harmony. That means rules must be respected. Ethan raised his hand. What about the people enforcing them? Her expression didn't change, but her voice tightened. This isn't personal. Maybe it should be. The room went quiet. The air felt heavy, like the pause before a storm. I filed a report, he continued, calm but sharp, with evidence. The board has it. Footage, timestamps, photos, of your SUV, of you. Someone in the front row muttered, "What footage?" Carol straightened. This meeting isn't about... Ethan cut her off. It's exactly about that. You keep talking about order, Carol, but what you really want is obedience. You can't stand the idea that someone could build something without asking you first. Her face flushed. That's enough, Mr. Hale. No, he said quietly. It's not. He stood up, the chair scraping against the tile like a gunshot, and walked out. By the time he got home, the sun was gone. The street lights glowed dimly through the fog, turning the air gold and gray. The birdhouse swayed in the wind. It was almost beautiful. The way it caught the light, the way it refused to break. He watched it for a long while, the silence pressing around him. Then he turned off the porch light and went inside. Sometime after midnight, a sound woke him. Not loud, just deliberate. He sat up. The house was dark. Another sound, the crunch of gravel. He moved to the window, heart steady but hard, pulled the curtains slightly aside. Carol's SUV was back. It crept along the curb, headlights off, tires whispering against the road. The security camera blinked red. He watched as the car rolled to a stop in front of his house. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the engine roared. Ethan's breath caught. The SUV accelerated, fast. Headlights flared, washing the oak in white. The front bumper struck the base of the tree with a brutal, dull thud. Metal crumpled. The birdhouse barely moved. There was a second impact. The sound of the car's hood folding in on itself. Then steam, hissing, spilling into the cold air. Ethan ran outside barefoot, the cold biting into his feet. The SUV's airbags had deployed, white fabric glowing in the beam of a streetlight. Carol was inside, dazed, hair tangled, face pale. She stumbled out, clutching her arm. Her breath came in ragged bursts. "What the hell?" she gasped. "What did you—" Ethan stood a few feet away, chest rising slowly. "It's wood, Carol. Just wood." She looked at the birdhouse, still hanging untouched, a single feather drifting from its roof. Her expression twisted. You set me up." He shook his head. "You set yourself up." Sirens began to echo down the street. Neighbors' lights flicked on one by one. Tom appeared at his porch, robe tied loosely, eyes wide. "What happened?" he called. Carol turned to him frantic. "He built that thing to destroy my car." "You drove into his yard."
Ethan began, then stopped. The flashing red and blue lights painted everything in motion. Snow, breath, fear. 2 officers stepped out, their boots crunching over the ice. One helped Carol to the curb, the other approached Ethan. "Sir, can you tell me what happened?" "I was asleep," Ethan said. "She hit my tree." The officer looked past him at the birdhouse. That thing didn't even dent. Ethan managed a faint smile. Guess it's well built. Carol shouted something about sabotage, about cameras, about traps. The officers exchanged looks. One said, "Ma'am, you were trespassing and speeding." She faltered, eyes darting between them. "You don't understand, he—" But no one was listening anymore. The neighborhood had gathered, drawn by lights and noise. Phones up, murmurs everywhere. Tom stepped closer to Ethan. "You okay?" Ethan nodded slowly. "Yeah. Guess your birdhouse won." "Guess so." By dawn, the SUV was gone, towed away under the pale light of morning. The road was scarred, black tire marks across white frost. The birdhouse still hung from its branch, unmoving. Inside, sunlight caught on a sliver of metal just beneath the surface, invisible unless you knew where to look. He watched it for a long moment, coffee steaming in his hand. Across the street, Carol's house was dark, curtains drawn. The power lines hummed softly overhead. He took a sip, the warmth spreading slowly through him. The wind shifted, and for the first time in weeks, it didn't feel cold. A small bird landed on the roof of the birdhouse, chirped once, and flew off again. Ethan smiled, tired, quiet, real. He turned to go inside, but glanced back one last time. The birdhouse gleamed faintly in the morning light, a tiny fortress of wood and resolve, and for a brief second, it almost looked alive.
It had been a month since the sirens. The snow was gone now, replaced by pale grass and puddles that caught the light like glass. Spring came shyly, one warm breeze at a time. Carol's house stayed quiet for weeks. Then one morning, a moving truck pulled up. Two men carried out boxes, mirrors, and that perfect pastel chair she used to sit in by the window. By evening, the house stood empty, blinds open for the first time in years. The neighborhood felt lighter. No more fines, no more emails. The HOA replaced her with a man named Jerry who smiled too much and didn't care about birdhouses. People started putting up small things again. Wind chimes, flags, tiny flower boxes. Color came back to the street like breath returning after a long hold. Ethan's yard looked the same. Quiet. Clean. The birdhouse still hung from the oak, paint weathered slightly now, but strong. Lily came to visit, wearing her yellow jacket, hair bouncing as she ran. "It's still here," she said, eyes wide. "Told you it would be." She looked up at it, squinting in the sunlight. "Do the birds like it?" "They do," Ethan said. "They just come when no one's watching." She smiled, tilting her head. "You're like that too." He laughed softly. "Maybe." A robin landed on the roof of the birdhouse then. Just a flicker of red and brown wings, and both of them went still, watching. The world around them hummed with the first real warmth of spring. Ethan took a slow breath and let it out. The fight, the noise, the anger, it was all fading now, melting into memory. Some things, he thought, don't need to be rebuilt. They just need to survive.